All right, I call this meeting of the Student Services Committee of the Waukesha Board of Education to order. First up is verification that the meeting was properly posted. Excellent, thank you. Next up is opportunity for public comment. Do everybody signed up?
No.
No. All right, moving on. Our action items. First is motion to approve minutes as presented. This is for a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Olivia. Any discussion on the minutes? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0.
I abstain.
So 4-0-1. Next up, under the action item is the Americana program approval.
Okay, so we have John, Revere, and Jerry with us, and I'll ask them if they'll come up here and sit in the hot seats.
I'll bring them.
Thank you. And then on the screen, and I'll unmute it, we have Kaylee from RBHI and Janet from RBHI.
Sorry, Joe, we can't hear anything. I don't.
You can't hear it. Oh. We take for granted the technology that we had in here. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have Kaylee and Janet. We have been in front of you this is our third month on this pilot program. We've kind of given you the overview, given you the kind of the components of it, taking you through the screener. We have a team here, and I'll let them introduce themselves to you face to face and what organization that they represent. John, if you wouldn't mind.
Merit Solutions originally was Memory Enhanced Retrospective Evaluation of Treatment, because when we go to see someone, they say, this is where we're starting, and then you come back later and we say, how have you been doing? And I can't remember what I had for lunch last Thursday, let alone how I was a month ago. So we developed that kind of thing, and that was our company name. We moved on from that to focus it on suicide risk assessment and immediate response to identified risk. And I'll pass it on to Revere for other comments.
I'm Revere Greist, and I'm Chief Operating Officer of Merit Solutions, also a co-founder along with John and our third partner, Chris Snyder, who's not here. And we focus on computerized suicide risk assessment. That's our main objective and focus.
And I'm Jerry Halverson, Senior Physician Executive at Rogers Behavioral Health right down the road in Oconomowoc. I'm participating in health and sport. It's an important time.
And then Kaylee and Janet, I apologize for the small screen, but it's the best we could do without any monitors, so.
Yeah, no problem. We know you're in the midst of moving. I'm Janet Lindau, Executive Director at Rural Behavioral Health Institute, and we work with school partners and community therapists to implement a suicide prevention program, which you've been hearing about.
So,
And I'm Kaylee. Oh,
go ahead, Kaylee.
sorry, I'm Kaylee Brown. I'm the Implementation Director for Rural Behavioral Health Institute.
Right. So over the last several months, we've come to you. One of the issues that we are facing in Waukesha and across our nation right now is a crisis in adolescent mental health. We see it in anxiety, depression, suicidality, and substance abuse. So going back several months, the individuals that are here began a discussion around like what would this look like if we brought it to Wisconsin, brought it to Waukesha. The folks at RBHI have done an excellent job over the last several years of putting this in place in Montana schools. They have developed a program where students participate in a screening and then get referred directly into care with a licensed mental health provider. So the school is the location where the assessment is done. We help facilitate the assessment, but professionals are the ones that are really working with the kids. We're not asking our teachers to be involved in this other than using their classroom space. So over our presentations, we talked to you about the design, obviously the instruments, give you an opportunity to take a look at those. In front of you tonight, we just have this brief one-pager, 1.5-page document. We had it at your place. It was in your packet. And it outlines a proposed pilot that we would use next year during the fall semester at East High School to run, facilitate, to kind of see how this would work for us in Waukesha and come up with a plan to troubleshoot any district-wide approach that we would use for this. So we're here to answer any questions, but we are seeking approval of the pilot this evening.
Discussion?
Do we have a cost and a fund?
So for the pilot, right now, all of the groups that are here are gonna donate their services for the pilot. We have a cost that Merritt gave us, it's $6 per student who participates in the screener per year. And this would be done grades 6 to 12, where we have approximately 4,000 students in the district. So if we had 100% participation, it would be $24,000 to do the survey. We are gonna take an opt-in approach to it. And at our prior presentations, it was shared that we could predict to have about a 40% participation rate. So, somewhere in the $12,000 neighborhood. Mark Leonard, who's here with us tonight, he has written again for the state mental health grant. It's a $75,000 grant. Those monies would be dedicated to implementing and running this program next school year.
And, sorry, point out that the charge in Montana is for use of the screener, but it can be used twice as it usually is. So it goes down to $3 per, and it can be used more often for the children who are really having difficulty to follow their progress across time. It's one per year, $6.
Yeah, and I did want to add, so we're more than willing to donate our time for the pilot. And then cost for implementation depends on what's needed. So it's a minimum charge of $2,500, and that gets you 10 to 15 hours of direct support from us for implementing. And if you don't need that, then there's no charge, and we're happy to let you do it as you see fit. And then the only other charge would be having therapists there working with the kids with recent suicidality. So that's to be determined depending on the therapists that are available.
That's why we asked Jerry to be with us tonight from Rogers, partnering with Rogers to have on-site therapists. And when we had some of our planning meetings, you had mentioned that we had the ability to do direct insurance billing for the mental health provider. But we also then, with that mental health grant, would have the money on site if a student didn't have the funds to cover that screening, that first intake meeting with a provider.
Is that grant been secured already?
Next year's grant has not been secured, but we have grant monies in place this year that can carry over into the following year.
And if I may, I'd like to make a suggestion. So in Montana, we actually fundraise to make the entire screening and same-day care for free for students. So just thinking about having Rogers providing that care, it might be worth just paying for it on the days that you want to screen, so that you're not keeping students who need care from receiving it. So we basically never charge insurance for that same day screening cost. We fundraise to provide that cost. That's something we'd be willing to pursue in collaboration with the school district. There are a couple major funders in Wisconsin who might have interest. So just throwing that out there as an option. But I think we're trying to reduce barriers to care and getting parents, you gotta get the insurance. It's a major hurdle for screening, universal screening, to use private insurance to pay for those therapy visits.
I just had a question. I'm new to the board, so excuse me if this has been discussed tonight. I might have missed it, but I did look through the literature. For the screening, for the trial for next year at East, how will the 100 students be selected? Is it just a voluntary, I mean, how do you round that 100 outward?
So there's a little over 100 students that attend East High School, and we would be looking for opt-in. So that would be the sample that we would be going to the school.
Oh.
We'd be starting it. If we get 40 kids that participate, 50 kids that participate, that's going to be based off of either individual consent if the student is 18 years old, or parental consent if they wish to have their child participate.
Sure, okay.
So the 100 is just the school
Okay,
size.
just oh, got it.
Do we have a idea of once we do this in the fall, we're only gonna focus on East in the fall?
Correct.
Okay, and so then if this continues into the spring, we're gonna try to hit that 40% roughly of the 4,000, would that then be the goal?
We'd have to look at scaling. So one of the things that I believe is great about this program is when you start to do the screening, you need to have a screening cycle that you can manage so that you can get kids, so say 10% of your kids identify as being high risk for suicide. You need to have enough staff on hand to see those kids that same day. So that would help us dictate then the pace that we would go by in that second semester. Ideally, we would go across all secondary schools at that time. But we need to see how this works first, which is why East is a nice pilot location.
Any other discussion? Mr. Webb?
Do we feel 40 students roughly would be a suitable number for a pilot? Will we learn what we need to learn from that size?
So Janet, I was just gonna ask Janet if she could fill in a little bit, because I think you were working with the Helena Public Schools where they started it at a alternative high school. If you could just talk about that experience, please.
I'm actually gonna hand it over to Kaylee, who is on site for that.
Yeah, so we started with a school district in Montana that's pretty large, that has 2 middle schools and 2 high schools, and totaling about 4,500 students. So what we did was we started with their 2 alternative schools. One was only about 15 kids and the other was about 40. And we know that students who are in alternative schools will typically have a higher need. So we looked at that data to decide how we were going to implement the rest of it. And so we really looked at what days we were going to screen, how many students we were, and how many therapists on site. So we ended up screening each middle school over a 3-week period and had about 200 kids screening a day, and then each high school over a week with about 250 students a day. So we were able to take the data just from that alternative school and figure out how we would schedule the rest of the students.
I think there's, and Kaylee and Janet may be helpful to give the historical perspective. You started very small with opt-in, and then grew from 1 school or 2 to 1,000 students, and then have grown to 10,000 students. So that getting the data early from a small group has enabled them to present the experience to other schools for their consideration and the way they want it done. There are some differences. Did I correctly state that? I want to make sure I'm not asking Janet and Kaylee.
Yeah, the first year RBHI was operating, we screened about 1,000 students over a year, and then took that data to kind of figure out what is the best way to schedule. And so using that data and how many kids needed to be seen and how many staff were needed, we were able to go from just over 1,000 students in 1 year to almost 11,000 this year. And working with schools to kind of figure out what staff you have on site that can see, so mental health professionals, and then how many contracted mental health professionals we need. So we try to integrate when we work with schools to figure out what their needs are so we can schedule the best to prepare them for screening. So no schools have ever kind of looked the same. Each school district is really different and each school is really different, but we really do an assessment of what staff are in that school so we can appropriately make sure all kids can be seen and that it's not too heavy of a lift for school staff that day.
So David, getting back to your original question, will 40 kids, 50 kids give us? It will, in the sense that if 10% or 20% of that 40 or 50 require treatment, we can play with that number a little bit, but then we could say, all right, we're gonna go to West High School, for instance, and do this, and that 40 kids is gonna go up to 450, and then what does that mean for us from a support standpoint after these assessments are given? We can build that number after that.
So would it be your expectation that we would scale it that way? We would start with this, with East, and then maybe go to another high school or middle school and
Correct.
continue to add on each additional semester?
Yeah, the nice thing about this program design is that the way they're running it in Montana, which again is something that I think really would benefit our students and families, is that it's like small bites. You know, you might do a middle school over 2 screening days where you have 40% of the participation, a high school over 2 or 3 screening days where you have 40-50% participation, so that it's always a manageable number. When we talked about the survey over the last couple of months, I'm sorry, you know, we're looking at a 5 to 10 minute online survey, which automatically generates a report that gives a score as to where you're at. So, you know, some early decisions, quick decisions can be made about which kids need to be seen. And then again, having those on-site providers there to handle that.
I think this was discussed the last time you all were here, but I don't recall what the number was. Is there kind of a rough number of people that we would expect would fall in that red area and need same day?
There is, and I think Janet or Kaylee could provide the exact numbers that we've seen in Montana. I think at alternative schools, you tend to have, you know, greater need
Sure.
on a proportional basis than at a non-alternative school. But Kaylee or Janet, do you have the figures for recent and lifetime suicidality and depression and anxiety, elevated
Yeah.
symptoms?
So the kids that would need to be seen the same day, and your state suicide rate is considerably lower than Montana's, but we're at 8% of all students that are screened on a particular day need that same day care. Now, there is variability among schools, and as we've mentioned, like I would double that number for the alternative school. And so that's one of the things we figure out before we screen is like, let's estimate based on what we know about the school for how many providers we need on site. The other thing we tend to see is the middle schoolers tend to screen higher than the high schoolers, at least with districts in Montana. And so we always buffer a little higher with therapists for middle schools, knowing that like the 6th graders tend to be screening the highest among all the grades.
Without getting in the weeds too much here, for the opt-in, is that done in any kind of advance notice to the school? Because what I'm wondering is, let's say for some reason, East, you know, there's just a really low participation rate. Would we want to be able to pivot quick enough to like grab another pilot group from another school? But I don't know if we'd have any forewarning on that.
So Kaylee,
Do
how?
you want to take that one?
Yeah, sorry. So the schools are the ones who send out the letters and the opt-out or opt-in forms. So they would get that back and understand how many students were going to participate. And then from there, I think we could have a conversation. If, you know, you only had 10 people who opted in, we could talk about what else we could do. And it's probably going to be about 40%. We provide all the opt-in letters, all of the consent forms that you'll need. But if you got them back and you had a really low number, we can definitely figure out what we could do next to get a higher rate.
Okay, so we're getting them back within, I mean, like a week ahead or a few days ahead or something like that?
Yes.
Okay.
So I typically have schools send it out about 10 days ahead of time.
And just one thing to consider, so if the recruitment rate is low, because parents just didn't get things back, if you are wanting to pilot in a second school, we'll just have to make sure that we have the staff in place at that, you know, whichever other school you'd like to pilot in. So it's, you know, we need a person on location that can go and identify kids that have reported recent suicidality. So it's just, it's totally doable, but just, it would require a little bit extra planning, but again, very fine with us.
Yeah, we might not want to, I'm just wondering.
Question, Betty?
Yeah, I had a question. So when it comes to parental consent, like from the perspective of the parent, what kind of information, I don't know who can speak to this, but what kind of information will they be provided? Is it just a consent form or like just a sheet with information? Will they have any access to like a website where they can maybe do a little deeper dive to make an informed decision? What, I guess, from their perspective, what will they receive to be able to feel like they could give consent, you know, well-educatedly?
So the consent forms and letters that we do have are pretty detailed. They're about 4 or 5 pages that have all the information about what we're screening for, why we're screening for it, and as well as talking about the validation of these screeners and what the next steps are. So if your child screens high, here's what we will do. Here's the information you'll be provided. Our website has a whole section for parents where they can ask, or like look up any questions. And then, of course, if my time is there, schools have had parents, you know, have me call parents and talk to them if there's a parent who's really on the fence. We really want parents to be a part of this because we know that people heal and get better if the whole family is involved. And so we never want to shy away from a parent who has a question. And so schools, I can talk through the school to help them understand. I can talk to a parent directly, but the forms that we give are really detailed on why we're doing it and just all the information that they could probably process about what the screener is and all the validation for it and next steps.
Yeah, that's good to know, because like I know a lot of parents could be a little taken aback by something like this. So the more knowledge they have, the more it's explained, the better. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. And we talk to parents that when their child screens, if they screen high, the school will call them before they meet with anyone and let them know, make sure that it's okay that they meet with someone, and then after they meet with them, the school calls again. Also, the summaries that the providers do are designed to go back to parents. We try to give them every piece of information possible to help them make good decisions for their child.
Great, thank you.
Can you just quickly
And
talk?
there are also demos available for parents. They can go through the screener themselves, because as Kayla was saying, like, we want parents to be informed of what their child is experiencing.
So Kaylee or Jenny, could you talk a little bit about, when you've done this in Montana, many of the school districts have started out with an opt-in, but could you talk about how they've shifted to opt-out over time? Because that was one of the things that stood out to me in you know, some of our discussions.
Yeah, well, I can't share too much experience about opt-in because I haven't had a lot of schools do it. In Montana, most of the schools from the very beginning have said that they want to do opt-out because they know they're going to get more kids screened, as well as the kids who probably need it the most. The schools who did opt-in last year all decided to do opt-out this year. And this year, out of, I think, 50 schools, we've had 2 who have used opt-in. So most of them have just shifted that to really have this be a universal screening, to screen every student, regardless of how someone thinks they're doing, so we can catch kids who might be struggling that no one knows about.
And I'll just go back, I was 2 years ago when we were doing small pilots of this with a couple of school districts. Both school districts were using opt-in, and they had between 25 and 40% participation rate. And once parents were comfortable with the concept of this, they moved the next school year to using opt-out, and they have had zero, as far as we know, they have not had any blowback from parents once they switched to opt-out.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Okay. So this is an interesting thing that I'm thinking through. Generally speaking, I tend not to be a fan of opt-outs. I tend to want the parents to make an affirmative decision. But in this particular case, and as I recall from the presentation, this screening tool tends to identify a lot of these students who have not been identified through other screening processes before. I'm not sure how I feel about the opt-in versus the opt-out, but I am curious as to why we're choosing to go opt-in for the pilot in this instance. What was the thought behind that?
So just, again, I think going back to your original, how you started, making sure the parents have full understanding of what their kids are getting into, and then not using that passive consent that comes along with opt-out. Ideally, as an educator, I would want to start with this as an opt-out process. As a parent, I can certainly understand the need to say, we're gonna get this going, it's new, we understand that these are sensitive topics for families, we wanna ask you if your child can participate first. The experience that they're having in Montana though, where either they're starting opt-out or they're shifting to opt-out in a very short period of time, I think by doing the pilot this way, it can give the board and the administration a semester to say, hey, we did opt in, we had a low participation rate, we know we have kids out there who have needs, we want to continue this as a full launch second semester, and we're going to shift that to opt-out. I mean, the language is very simple to change, the process is a minor adjustment on our end from an implementation standpoint. But one of the things that John and Revere and Kaylee and Janet have shared is that in every one of the screenings that they've done, they have identified a kid who nobody would have assumed was struggling with anything. Top of the class, captain of the team, participating in all the clubs, that has come forward through this, and that they're able then to quickly get help. And that is the ultimate goal of a program like this, is to get kids the help that they need.
Do we intend to include the substance and alcohol piece as well, which I see listed as optional?
Yes. Merit is still we're just getting done with the developmental phase of the screening. But yes, I believe the substance abuse would be an important component, particularly in the pilot, to give us information as to what we wanted to do down the road.
Yeah, and just to clarify, we have been doing the screenings with RDHI using a platform called Qualtrics, which you may have heard of. We don't have any protected health information in our system, so students log in with student ID codes that the school provides to us beforehand, and which we upload into the system. We're changing now to a new system called MARS, Merit Assessment and Reporting System, which is a proprietary system we're building that we'll launch in the summer for use in the fall. And so that's the changeover. But we have CRAFT, which is the substance abuse assessment, built into the new MARS system as well, and that'll be available.
And just a note on that, so if we're gonna start with an alternative high school, our recommendation would be to include the substance use, like an identifier, which is the CRAFT assessment, just because we're seeing pretty high substance misuse in populations that are attending alternative high schools, at least in Montana. So it would be another way to identify kids that need specific help.
And just to add on to that, if the substance use is something that you don't want to use for other schools, it's optional to change it for other schools. So some places in Montana, they just use it for their high school and not their middle schools. So we can always change a screener based off what that school's need is.
And we are seeing high rates of vaping in particular, marijuana in particular in Waukesha. So I believe that the substance abuse screener would be something we would want to continue to explore. And again, just a kind of high-level overview of this, the school is the location where this is done. The only school staff per se that would be involved are school psych, social workers, and counselors. So our staff that has training and how to help and support students with mental health needs. The rest of the work then is going to be transitioned off to the licensed providers that we're going to have. So we're not going to be asking our teachers to do a mental health screening in class. We're not going to put this in their hands. That they're certainly caring individuals and they want the best for the kids. This just isn't their expertise. We have enough staff where we can build this in. We have key positions already in the district that can help support this. And with the partnership with RBHI and their help and their experience, this is something that I believe we could have a successful pilot and a successful implementation in next year.
I have one question. So when a school moves in the direction of opt-out, and you can probably speak from experience, At that point, if it's an opt-out situation, how is it communicated to the community, to the school, to the parents, that this is an ongoing, this is going to be happening? How do they find that information?
We would resend letters with the opt-out letter and form, and then a lot of schools have put it maybe on their social media, if that's something that schools use a lot, and just give them that information. So now, instead of you signing this that your child is going to participate, we're switching it. You'll have to sign if you don't want them to. And it's worked really well, and we have a really low rate of opt-out returns.
And we continue, regardless of what type of consent is used, if a child was identified and is going to be seeing a therapist, that their parent is called beforehand and after. So the parental involvement is as much as we can make it, regardless of consent type.
Great, that was my second part of the question. If they were, identified and they necessarily, the parent didn't opt them out because maybe they didn't, see the information, what have you, that if there were something to come up, at that point, the parent then would immediately be
Yes,
brought
we
in.
always notify parents and try to educate them. So we send out the same informational packets with the opt-out consent that we do with the opt-in. So again, this isn't trying to fly under the radar. It's just we know getting consent forms back from parents can be pretty challenging. And some schools have gotten kind of clever out here with it, and they, I have all that help packets that you have to sign at the beginning of a year. So they'll put it in with that information, and so they get pretty good return rates if they're using opt-in or opt-out. But I guess either one.
Good idea.
Mr. Mowbray?
Once a student is identified as having an issue, do you ever get resistance from parents at that point that say, no, we don't want them to meet with someone, or they don't maybe see the severity of the issue? I mean, do you ever get part, or do you see that in your larger programs at all?
Yeah, we kind of have the opposite, where parents take it more serious when they meet with someone outside of the school. So we do have a lot of parents who use that session summary from a therapist to say, okay, these are very real issues that my child is having. These are very real struggles, and now I want to get them help. For the most part, parents always agree that they can meet with someone, and they always get the information. We have had parents who have decided not to have us help them find follow-up care, but I would say 95% of parents have said, yes, please have them meet with someone. They really, really like to have that summary to kind of identify what is going on. And that information is really easy for parents to understand, so they can see what is happening with their child. So we kind of have the opposite, where we don't have parents really saying, please don't have them see someone. Instead, we have parents who ask for them to see someone.
I think we have had, it didn't refuse the same day care, but we have had a couple instances of parents that once they had the information, they continuously ignored that their child was having pretty significant mental health issues, and the school involved Child Protective Services after that hadn't been addressed. But that was all post-screening, and the school actually used our data that was generated for that child to get that child, to make sure that child received the care that they needed. But that is, I mean, that's, I think 2 kids we've had this entire school year, so out of 11,000.
And one of the benefits is that if a parent does refuse to have their child be seen, the school still knows that they are struggling, and the school can still see the student while they're there and talk to them and maybe help build some safety planning and some resources for them. So that was a case for one student whose parents didn't really understand the severity of it, but the school really stepped in and started meeting with them weekly as they can, and that student started to do better, and parents started to understand more.
And actually, the last piece of it is, I would guess your school has a safety plan. So at least in Montana, schools have safety plans, and once they're enacted, the school, so if a child's been identified as being a possible risk to themselves or others, the school then enacts the safety plan, and the school has every legal right to do that, and so that would be like the worst case scenario for getting a child that has declared that they are at imminent risk to themselves or others to the care they need that same day. And also the age of consent, I need to check it for Wisconsin, but in Montana, if a child is 16 years old or older, they can consent to care without parental consent. But again, we try to avoid all of those situations by involving parents from the very beginning.
Any other questions, any discussion?
So I guess I'd like to just understand a little bit better the case management piece. So I know there was a discussion in the last session around the need for these to be included because of the difficulty, I think, everywhere. I know it's really bad in Montana, but I think it's probably true here too, to find available services, especially for ongoing care for a student. How does that work in the pilot? How do we envision that unfolding?
So if you remember some of our presentations that we've done on the Pathways to Healing program, the PATH program, we do have at the beginning of the year on-site seats that are available, that if a kid needed ongoing care, we could have that at school. One of the reasons why we asked Jerry to be here from Rogers is that from that screening point into then finding a provider, either through face-to-face services or telehealth services, making sure there's the availability of that. We do have, in all of our buildings, we have student services staff that can kind of keep a hand on things. And we have it's mental health navigator, the term, right? We have a mental health navigator who works in our district to help families find resources. So we do have a number of people on hand who can help make that bridge. But again, getting to that point of what's the follow through on the family end, because that, we just want to make sure they know that their child is struggling right now. That's our component of this, and making sure they have the avenues to care.
So that case management piece truly is from the point of identification after the screening to the point that they find ongoing care with a therapist of their choice or that's available.
Is that how that's working out in Montana, Kaylee?
Yes. And another thing that we do that we would replicate for all of you is we really have worked to create kind of a resource guide for parents. So if parents don't want to engage in case management, we still are giving them information about local resources, how to access them, how to check your insurance for mental health benefits. So every parent would still get that with the screener if their child, flagged high, or if they just want that information. So if a parent decides not to engage in case management, we're still giving them all that information. And then if they decide that they want to get it on their own, they have all of that.
And we're building that specific to your region. That's one of our summer projects.
Anything else? Questions? Great, if there's no other discussion, we're looking for a motion.
I would move to approve RBHI pilot program as presented.
Second.
Excellent. Any further discussion, any last questions before we vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, 5-0. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Delighted to help out.
Yep,
Yeah.
we're glad to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Indeed.
And just let me say, I'm
Thank you.
58 years
Yeah, we look
as a
forward to working
physician,
with you.
and
Take care.
this is
Take care.
probably the most satisfying work I've ever done. And I've been doing suicide risk assessment with computers since 1973. And this is the best we've ever done. So glad it's here in Wisconsin.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care.
All right, that concludes our action items. Next up is discussion information items. We have the ATOTA. Pronounce that acronym.
We usually just say AODA because,
You dump it in tea.
well, tea is
It's not a
tobacco.
big one or anything.
And to find a pack of cigarettes on a kid these days is pretty rare. Usually comes in a vaping format, so. The presentation is in front of you. We printed out the slide deck. And so we will go through that together. So thank you for letting us speak tonight.
Taking the time.
This is Jody Ebinger Bentley. She serves as our AODA coordinator for the district. She'll talk about some of her duties and responsibilities as we go through the presentation. And for those of you who may not know me, my name is Mark Lenner. I'm the Director of Student Services for the school district. So thank you very much. All right. So the purpose of our presentation tonight is to inform you about the history of AODA programming in the school district of Waukesha, to report on the successes and areas for growth that we see as we move through the work, and also to discuss plans for the future of AODA programming and support in the district.
All right, so I just wanted to just review a little bit, kind of just like the evolution of prevention services here in the district. This is my 6th year here, and I was hired on to be actually the social worker at East Alternative School, and also to do to be the AODA coordinator. I came from a school district that I actually was doing some prevention work, and I really enjoyed like the community collaboration, and so I kind of hopped aboard knowing that there was kind of a clean slate here in Waukesha. There were some kind of big events that happened around around AODA prevention, but not a lot of like ongoing services or ongoing prevention. So when I started back in 2017, I was told to like, all right, here's some community coalitions, like go figure it out, you know? So it was exciting for me. That first year was a little slow, but I got connected with our Waukesha County Drug-Free Communities Coalition at that time and met numerous community partners, in which one of our strongest partners has been Elevate, who works out of Washington and Waukesha counties. And they have kind of like been with us every step of the way, helping us to kind of build different prevention programs and also involving some other organizations. So, and also the AODA coordinator's job is always to coordinate that youth risk behavior survey across the district and then present the results in a meaningful way as we went along. So we really just started to look at that data. We tried to really look at the kind of like the needs of our students, like kind of what offenses are we seeing in the district, and then looking at where our resources were. So by the next school year, 2018-19 school year, really kind of had solidified some partnerships with Elevate, and they helped bring in our Peers for Peers clubs, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about what exactly they do. We had some Too Good for Drugs, starting in our 2 of our middle schools that year, and really began searches for how do we intervene early with students that might have a drug or alcohol offense on school grounds. So,
Could you explain what Too Good for Drugs is?
oh, sure, and I'll get more into that too as we go along, but Too Good for Drugs is a universal prevention curriculum that is 10 lessons given. We started it in the middle schools. We kind of built, starting with 6th grade, built the following year 6th and 7th, and then the next year 6th, 7th, and 8th. It is actually provided by Elevate's health educators in our middle schools, the 3 large middle schools. And so we have shown really good results, and I promise I will get more into that later. Just want to kind of give that brief overview. So in 2019 school year, 2019-20, the Drug-Free Communities Coalition, the 10 years had ended, and so it was kind of like, what are we need to continue to collaborate. So What we decided to do is create a district-wide committee and invite some of those community partners that we had really been formed those relationships with to come to the district and have those conversations. So we still are meeting. We call it, I didn't have a catchy name, so it's the SDW, Substance Use Prevention Committee. We were meeting monthly up until this year. We went to quarterly just due to lots of other commitments, and also we're saturated right now as far as capacity with our prevention and early intervention services. So we could still continue to action plan, but we just really don't have capacity right now to build in a lot more services. We're really kind of up and running now with those services. So we've kind of built each year different things. Prime for Life is an early intervention program that we use after all students are referred who have a drug or alcohol violation on school grounds. I should say all secondary students. We did start with just high schools. Last year, we were able to add a separate middle school class because we don't want those kids mixing, right, between like a 6th grader and a 10th grader, probably not a great thing. So they have now a middle school focused class as well that they offer for us. And we have contracted with different agencies through the past years. And we did end up last year and this year with Elevate because really they cater to our needs the best, and they were very flexible in coming into the schools versus us having to have our families or kids get to Pewaukee to an office or so forth, which we know that those can be barriers. Also to address the popularity and increase in vaping nicotine, we early on had a vaping, anti-vaping action plan, and also we're able to locate an intervention program for those students who are caught vaping, and really any tobacco use, but I can tell you in the last 3 years, other than finding a lighter on kids, like it has all been vapes. There's no cigarettes. I don't think we've caught anyone with cigarettes in several years. So we started that with a pilot back in the second semester of the 2021 school year, and then last year we were able to roll that out for all secondary schools for a first vaping offense. We want it to be education, and unless there's there's extra things with that incident, typically the student does not receive a citation. It may be an in-school suspension with doing this kind of online education program that takes about 2.5 to 3 hours to complete.
For first offense.
For first
Second
offenses.
offense, they would likely be cited by our SROs.
Yeah, and or suspended.
Yeah. That's for a nicotine vape.
And so, and then last year we started, the heroin task force in Waukesha County kind of reignited last year. So I am a part of that as a community member, and Mark is also on the steering committee this year of the heroin task force. And then last year we added, I was able to write a DPI grant for AODA prevention to expand that Too Good for Drugs into the elementary schools, but we just did 2 as a pilot starting in 4th grade. Because what we saw is that when students were getting to 6th grade, they were already faced with lots of peer pressure and lots of exposure, especially to vaping nicotine, and now more increasingly to THC. So waiting to 6th grade, sometimes till second semester of 6th grade, to get that prevention and those peer refusal skills, was just a little too late. So we've had good results. This is our 2nd year at Prairie and Hatfield with that, and we've had really good reception from parents. Teachers really feel that it's necessary, and the middle school has been really happy that it starts earlier than 6th grade. So that's kind of a really brief overview, but you can look at that timeline more closely if you'd like. Which brings us to our community partnerships.
Yeah, this is slide number 5. So some of our current community partners are the Alcohol Resource Council, also known as Your Choice, Aurora Healthcare, Elevate, as we've talked about. I'm new to the district this year. This is my 11th or 10th month in the district. And I previously worked in Washington County, worked very closely with Elevate on a lot of the same types of goals. They're a fantastically responsive partner. And they really keep up on, what is kind of the leading edge of AODA concerns in the state, and then they also are always looking for education and treatment options, so they're a great partner. Freighter in the medical college, we worked through them. That was the grant, correct?
Yep.
We'll talk about that more in a second. Waukesha County Heroin Task Force, I'm on the steering committee for that. Rosecrans, Waukesha County Department of Health and Human Services, I meet with them usually twice a month for issues of this nature. And of course, our partnership with the Waukesha Police Department, with the SROs in our building, many of whom actually are drug recognition experts, which is a extremely rigorous and time-consuming process to become certified in drug recognition. Because oftentimes when we have an issue, parents will ask the question in a pre-expulsion meeting, well, how did you know he was under the influence? And that SRO can speak to that very specifically through a battery of tests similar to what you might see for someone who might be driving under the influence of alcohol. There's a similar battery of tests for marijuana. And so the SROs are able to make that determination based on the evidence that's provided through that battery of tests.
And I want to mention that these current community partners they regularly attend our district-wide committee. There's several others that we've had in the past, like Pro Healthcare, Healing Hearts, and a few other organizations that this year kind of have, fallen off, not attended the meetings, but these partners typically always attend every one of our meetings. So it's really nice. And then with that substance use prevention committee, we also have representatives from each of our secondary schools that come this school year, student services and or administration. And that has been really helpful this year to have more APs involved at those meetings, because they're on the front line seeing those offenses, and also have good input about what they'd like to see as prevention efforts in their schools. So as I talked a little bit about that substance use prevention committee, really we went through this whole process of the strategic prevention framework, and went through evidence-based processes to figure out what are our needs, where are our gaps, and we're continuously really studying that and revisiting that, getting feedback from our committee members, looking at our data, not just our discipline data, but also the youth risk behavior data to see changes. We don't typically share out amongst the schools comparisons, but we're looking at North has a higher rate of self-reported marijuana use. What's going on over there? Maybe we need to go and try to do some more parent education or things like that. So we're constantly just really studying those results and trying to make sure that we're responsive to the needs of the district. As Mark mentioned, we have some other coalition participation, and I was asked this year to represent the Heroin Task Force for the Alliance for Wisconsin Youth, which is a statewide alliance of different coalitions that are, for treatment and prevention of substance use. So that opens up some more funding sources for us as well. So that was quite an honor for me.
Okay, as far as 22-23 advances, one of the great things that happened, and Jody did the legwork on this, was a great resource for the district. She wrote a grant from Freighter to the Medical College for a youth wake-up call presentation that was done at Waukesha North High School on March 8th. And this is one where they presented, they'll come in and they'll do a presentation that looks like a bedroom. And so there's a mock bedroom there, and then you are there as the parent looking through your child's belongings. And what is it that you're looking for of those red flags of drug use? Some of them are very simple, like if you have Visine, for example. If your student has Visine, you're like, they don't have any eye allergies, they don't wear contacts, what's going on? So that might be one. Obviously lighters, things like that, but also a toilet paper tube or a paper towel tube filled with fabric softener sheets. Why do they do that? Because if they're vaping in the house, especially in the wintertime, you don't want to crack a window open. You do it through the softener sheet so that the smell goes away. So it's that type of thing. Jody was instrumental in getting that funding, and she also helped to run the presentation.
No, Jill Werner at North actually set that up for us.
Okay.
I had Prime for Life then.
Oh, all right.
But unfortunately, I mean, and I'll be real, like, unfortunately, we did not have a good parent turnout, even though we advertised it to all middle and high school parents. We had 21 parents attend. So that was kind of disappointing. It's a little disappointing to like write that report, that grant report, like, and to show them like, it's. So, I mean, I think in the future, we need to do more to get the word out. And we do have some improvements in parent education coming up for next year that we're planning on. But it is really nice though that like, we do have these community partners that are willing to step out and do that. As I mentioned before, our Peers for Peers clubs, they are really amazing groups of students at each of our traditional high schools. They have committed to being drug and alcohol free and to being a positive helper in their schools. So they go through extensive training. They give up 2 days of their summer, and then there's a fall training and a spring training that they go through. And really, they're trained in mandated reporting. They're trained in how to actively listen to your peers and to provide positive support and refer them to a trusted adult in the school. So, you know, like, so even if it's like as simple as like AP exams are right now, right? Like, and so like students are really stressed out. It's the Peers for Peers helpers that are saying like, all right, like, I'll, you know, like, what can I do to help? Do you need a study partner? Or maybe you should talk to your school counselor, like if they're seeing like, you know, more signs of distress. To like the more serious things like, you know, maybe a friend was at a party and, you know, got pressured into doing something that they didn't want to do. They disclose that, and they know that if it's, you know, maybe it was a sexual assault or something of that nature, that peer helper goes and says like, I have to report this. Like, and so like, it's not, it's to help, you know, our kids not fall through the cracks. And because when we look at the data, like usually in the youth risk behavior survey, over 50% of our students, of our high school students, said that they would go to a peer, not an adult, when they needed like emotional help. Or so we're really looking to add more of that in. So our clubs have really gained in strength over the years, and I think West and North both had over 20 students this school year be involved. And so they also plan awareness campaigns, such as the ones you can see in the picture right here. We are at, it's called Be the Majority. So basically, we're highlighting that positive messaging that the majority of high school students do not use drugs or alcohol. So be that majority. There was tons of giveaways. I was able to actually secure a grant from Waukesha County in the fall to provide like tons of giveaways with that positive messaging, and also resources for parents who stop by the table. And it was fun. It was at a basketball game. The kids got to throw t-shirts out, you know, to the crowd and so forth. So that was a good event. We like to do at least one of those bigger awareness campaigns per year, and then each club will do it within their high school as well. And they also go around to the health classes to talk about positive, you know, like taking care of your mental health, and then also like during like the AODA unit, they might have them come in and talk about vaping and things like that. So they're educating their peers as well as being a positive influence in their school. Also, this is a new thing that we did this school year, just recently in April. The North High School Peers for Peers went over to Horning Middle School and did an escape room, like a mock escape room. It was called Escape the Vape. So Elevate had created this little like different clues and resources and little lock boxes, and so like for every question or maze or something that the middle school students got correct, they got to open up a lockbox with another code. And the whole kind of the goal of this was to, before the timer in this little lockbox went off, that they escaped the vape. So they got, you know, they learned about vaping and the negative effects of that before that timer went off. And so it was a fun way to teach the students you know, just about those negative effects of vaping and why they should avoid it. And again, hearing it from high school role models and not just adults, you know, or their teachers. So we are I got an email just a couple weeks ago saying like, from the social worker at Horning saying like, hey, like if you guys still have time and you guys wanna come over, we've got more classrooms that wanna do this. I think we did only 4 classrooms that day, but it was great. Too good for drugs. So this is kind of my baby in the district. Like so, it is an evidence-based prevention curriculum. As I mentioned earlier, it's 10 lessons. It's not on the computer. They do not believe of doing things like technology-wise. They're pretty old school. We do board games with the lessons. They do activities. They do role plays where they have like act out little skits. The first 5 lessons are focused more on those positive social skills, decision-making skills, peer refusal strategies that really reinforce a lot of what they're learning during second step. But it builds on each other so that when they do start learning about the negative effects of certain substances, they have then those decision-making skills in that same language to learn about those. And so it's not drug education. It's really talking about the negative effects of certain substances and then how to make better decisions and less risk choices, and that how these substances could affect their goals for the future. I think that's a good distinction to make because in the past, even when I was probably in elementary school, we had DARE, and it really glorified, like it made it like, ooh, like this makes you feel like this, and like, you see all these pictures. There's no pictures of drugs in Too Good for Drugs. There's no glorifying like, maybe even some of the positive effects that people might say they get from using. It is all focused on just, being a good citizen and then also making those positive decisions for yourself. So we really have seen like the results show that students increase their perception of risk of using those substances after those 10 lessons.
That's one of the key questions on the behavior risk survey.
Yeah.
Is do they perceive a risk to this behavior? And so we want to make sure that they do. And that's an ongoing concern.
Yep. And so, like I said, that elementary pilot program has really been received well. We've had positive results. We're actually right now in finishing off our 10 lessons. We've always waited till the end of the school year, kind of like that last trimester, to implement it because second step goes until about March, and so we kind of pick up so that we're not taking away academic time in those elementary classrooms. It is already dedicated time, for that social emotional learning piece. Also, as part of that grant, myself and one of our elementary school counselors, Amanda Desua, who was amazing, just recently got trained as trainers for Too Good for Drugs. So if we do receive the grant that I just wrote, for the next 2 years, we will be able to roll this out to the rest of our elementary schools, using our current student services staff to deliver that curriculum. The end goal would then be to eventually train the teachers to deliver the curriculum. It's not overly difficult at all. It's very scripted in a fun way. And so that's like the long-term goal, but hopefully we will see that expand with that grant. If not, we may have to hold off on a little bit because the curriculum isn't the cheapest.
Sure, I'll do the next 2. So Aspire is the early intervention programming that we utilize for a student that would have a violation of a nicotine vape. Oftentimes what they will do with this is the student will have to serve some time in in-school suspension, and they will complete the Aspire curriculum while they are in school. So the school notifies Jody, she quickly creates an account for that student. The student does it right there and then while they're waiting, or while they're spending their time in in-school suspension, along with doing other classwork as well. So this year we've had 79 students referred, we had 62 who have completed, and 17 who are currently in progress. So that's that first offense intervention.
Yeah, and I am right now, we're exploring some other early intervention programming. Aspire has now kind of gone to be, they want to kind of be more of a universal prevention, and they're no longer kind of endorsing it for like intervention or a discipline, you know, like, or I guess alternative to like discipline. However, when we kind of join on with them, it's free, it's through the University of Texas. They were okay with that, and so there are some other options that are coming, but this did have an evidence base, it was research based to show that students were really learning, and it also provides some quitting resources in there, so that's why we like that one. So next year, we'll be using something, so.
Yep. So the next one is Prime for Life. This is what we utilize for students that would have a first offense THC violation. So if they were either in possession of THC or clearly under the influence. Another evidence-based early intervention program. We use this with middle school and high schoolers. Not had to even discuss this with elementary schoolers, thankfully. So first offense, drug or alcohol possession or under the influence. There were 5 high school classes held this year. It's a 3-part series. The students do it Wednesday afternoons after school at East Alternative. Elevate comes in, they send one of their educators to come in and take the students through the curriculum. So it's a total of 7.5 hours of programming. The middle school, it's a very similar curriculum, not exactly the same, a little bit shorter, with a 2-part class at 5.5 hours. This year we've had 40 high school students referred to date. This year 34 have completed, 2 have had legitimate reasons to be absent, and so they have to make up the time that they've missed, and 4 students are currently awaiting the next class.
This starts tomorrow.
Yeah, this is a condition of a pre-expulsion contract that they would sign upon a first offense possession and use of THC. We've also had 19 middle school students referred to date, 15 who have completed, and 3 who are awaiting the class. Elevate facilitates that, and we keep track of who has completed, and then that meets that requirement of that pre-expulsion.
So just to give you an idea, there was a 68% increase in middle school students referred to Prime for Life. Last year we had 1 class, it was like 4 or 5 students in the middle of the school year. We may have had 1 or 2 more offend after that, and I think we just referred them to individual services because we have to have a minimum of 4 students to hold a class. And so this year, we're up to 19, and I only had one class scheduled. Elevate was nice enough to schedule another class, and if we get kind of consent or like participation, they're willing to come back after school and hold the class at the library for the students. This also does help families and students if the student did receive a citation. It is the same course that the court would refer to through another agency, but they would have to pay a large amount of money to attend. So
we cover the cost.
Yeah, and we work with the municipal court just to make sure that this, like what Elevate does is recognized, is really the same, it is the exact same class as the other agencies do, and so they accept that through the courts as well.
Yep.
All right.
Okay, next steps. So slide 16 for this year and moving forward. We did see an increase in repeat offenses after taking Prime for Life. We had 15 students who offended a second time for possession of THC. So that's a 15% recidivism rate. In the past, the recidivism rate was generally 7 to 10%. So those repeat offenses would reopen the pre-expulsion process because it's a violation of their contract. Most of those contracts are written to go for at least a calendar year. So when they meet with me to discuss the issue, that contract goes forward for a year, and they know that, and they know that, for example, drug testing is a condition of that contract. We've had situations where students have reoffended just by, we hear about the fact that they were, you don't even necessarily have to catch them. Once you have reasonable suspicion of use, we're then having them drug tested and they're testing positive. There have been other situations where students have just been caught once again. And so that can result in a change of school placement, the removal from the general school environment, or that referral for expulsion. Generally speaking, that's a third offense where they're in possession of THC at school. We are looking at additional intervention services, some of which Jody's talked about, but to help move students into treatment. And what we find, and I don't think that this is all that unusual, when it's a first offense, the student or the family will go, I can quit at any time. This isn't a problem. I've got this under control. When it's a second offense and they're being moved out of their home school into an alternative learning environment, then it becomes much more of a, well, maybe we should probably get some help about this. And so what we're looking at is a mechanism by which we will refer those students to one-to-one counseling that Elevate could provide. This is again through the grant funding, where they would do, instead of doing Prime for, we can't do Prime for Life again, they've already done it once. But now we would move them into one-to-one counseling as a condition of their continued participation in the district. So
it's a program called Teen Intervene, and it's not drug treatment. It is a motivational interviewing program. So to try to help move that student to then hopefully accepting
readiness.
like the readiness for treatment, and like really realizing like okay, if you could stop, why don't you try? And kind of challenging their thinking a little bit about that, but more of an individual setting versus it's really psychoeducation, that the Prime for Life does is more of like education about your high risk choices, your biology, how that all plays into factors. So we're hoping, again, that's part of that that DPI grant of $25,000 next year that we're hoping to receive in order to provide that.
And just so you're aware, whenever we have that, whenever we have an offense, whether it's a first or a second offense, we always try to have a member of the student services team present for those pre-expulsion and those review meetings, because it's not just about the disciplinary process. There's also the support process. And both the pre-expulsion and the abeyance contracts that are written under these circumstances have that opportunity for the student to get the help. Whether it's here through student services, through our PATH counseling, whether it's a referral through Care Solace that we utilize, you've heard me talk about that frequently. It's not just, oh, your kid got caught with this and now we're going to have a disciplinary process. There's always a way to get the family the support that they need. It's just a matter of getting them to move forward with it. That's oftentimes the hard part. Care Solace has been successful in placing students into care, and drug abuse is one of those things that they will help families to find help for. So
That's all right.
Yeah.
I don't like to talk about future grants that we haven't received yet, because I feel like if we don't receive it, then you just heard a lot of information that's really not valid. But we do want to expand that AODA prevention to all elementary schools. We'll do a phased-in process. Next year it would be 5th grade only, and then the following year would be 4th and 5th grade. Expand that Prime for Life to make sure that we can accommodate the increase in middle school referrals. That Tier 3 intervention that we just talked about, Teen Intervene. And then the other component to this, which is always is a need, because I do believe that a lot of times our students don't perceive the risk in using drugs and alcohol because their parents or caregivers don't always perceive that same risk, or they have maybe some misconceptions about marijuana sometimes. And we also want to make sure, like just even like the wake up call bedroom did, making sure that parents are armed with the correct information and also know how to start conversations with students. So next year, even if we don't get this grant, Elevate has committed to help us provide that parent education even without funding for it, to at least offer 4 parent caregiver education sessions, 1 geared at elementary and middle school and 1 geared at high school each semester. So looking at, again, those drug trends, how to spot it, how to start those conversations early and often with your children, and then also making sure that those resources are available for our parents to access if they have concerns or if they just need to talk or don't know how to do it. Because what happens is, what I see is when students get past the point of just an experimentation and they're using regularly or they're getting caught more than once on school grounds, it is very hard to pull that student back from that. And so the earlier we can do, the more that we can prevent, the less we have to provide those intervention services.
Then our last slide, we will continue to review those vaping education intervention programs that we utilize. We will explore additional prevention and awareness options for our students, and we continue to train our staff in what to look for in terms of drug or alcohol abuse signs within students, but also what are the latest trends in the types of vapes that are out there, What are students utilizing, what's being marketed to our students, unfortunately, and where they're getting it from. So that's an ongoing concern. Any questions? Thank you so much.
Any questions? David?
Yeah, so, I actually have just a couple. Can I first just clarify? I think I heard you say that in Prime for Life, you had 40 referred this year so far?
High school.
High school students.
Oh, that's high school, okay.
That's
So
high
school.
that 19 number was
Oh.
not the middle school share of total referrals?
No,
No.
two separate, so
Okay.
59 total, yeah.
Yeah, and I think there might have even been another one
Yeah,
today, so.
yeah.
That didn't make it in there.
And then just a second question, and you may not know the answer, but I'm just, and maybe this isn't actually statistically significant, but you noted that you had that increase in offenses after taking Prime for Life this school year, after seeing it typically being that recidivist
Yep.
lower. Do we have any idea what might be driving that?
I do. Students are becoming addicted at an earlier age and doing a better job of hiding it. And, you know, as far as what we're seeing in the area, I think I've mentioned this before, marijuana is a $39 billion a year industry. Legal marijuana is a $39 billion a year industry in the United States. In Illinois alone, in 2022, they sold $1.5 billion of legal marijuana. Of course, there's the illegal trade as well. Michigan has legalized recreational marijuana, and Minnesota will do so, I think, next week as their legislative session wraps up. So the availability is ubiquitous these days. Kids can order vapes on Snapchat. The dealers, and Instagram, the dealers will deliver it to them. You know, the price will be higher than if they were able to go and get it themselves. I think that's a big reason why. It's even when families are supportive, even when everybody does all the things the right way, it's just so easy to get. And so the message that we're sending is, you know, we want you to make good choices inside and outside of school, but at all costs, not here. That's what we hammer down, both from the preventative standpoint, but then also from the disciplinary standpoint, once we have to have those meetings.
I just got a question.
Sure.
For the Too Good for Drugs, I know you said that was, it has been in the middle schools for the last few years.
Yes.
And I think you said, you mentioned that this past year was 2 elementary schools?
Yes, the last year and this year.
Okay.
This is our second year in the elementary.
Got it. Is it the same curriculum, or is it different?
Yes.
Is there a variation
So
so that they're not
it's-
getting the same thing?
Yeah, they're not getting the same thing. It is developmentally appropriate. So like in 4th grade, we talk about like the core skills are the same, presented in a developmentally appropriate way. But then the substances in 4th grade is only over-the-counter and prescription medication safety, alcohol, and nicotine. That's all they talk about as far as substances. In 5th grade, marijuana is added. 6th grade, I think it goes, 5th grade is very short about marijuana, the negative effects, and then in 6th grade, it's a little bit deeper with that. And then I think 7th and 8th do mention like some different street drugs, just, the names of them and like the negative, yeah, like that doesn't get up yet. Like I don't even, like maybe 8th grade, like
Yeah.
heroin. So yeah, developmentally appropriate, again, like we're not telling kids about everything, the thing we have to do when we're trained is like, we make sure that we like shut down personal conversations, right? Like, so personal stories, nope, like, cause the 4th graders like, my dad vapes, like, no, we're not talking about your dad today. We just want you to know, like, for children, and we really focus like on children and your developing brain, and how it affects your brain and, the different things and your decision making and your future goals. And so, that is what I really like about this program, that it is very developmentally appropriate and you're not getting too much information for those little young minds. You're getting they're getting just enough to know that this is really not good for me, especially as a kid.
You mentioned something about the Too Good for Drugs the curriculum being costly, or is that
Well,
because it's so tailored to?
Because they're big kits. They're like these big kits and they have like lots of game pieces and posters because they don't, and I even checked with our trainer, when we went to the training this last month, like, can we get something digital that just would be like a little easier and less clunky? So it is. So when I priced it out for this grant, the curriculum for all of our elementary schools for each projected 4th and 5th grade classroom next year, it was going to be about 20 grand. So like, to me, that's costly because this grant's only $25,000 total, and we want to do some different things. So, you know, could we find the money? I don't, you know, that's not my department. So like, but I mean, this grant because we would have $25,000 the next 2 years if received. It will definitely cover the cost of the Too Good for Drugs, that the other additional tier 3 interventions, and those parent education classes. So.
Just another question.
Sure.
So when the program is implemented during the school day, which subject is it infused, or, you know, because obviously minutes are being taken to do this, which subjects seem to be?
So in the elementary, we take it out of their like second step time, so like that social emotional learning time. So like, because these lessons are 45 to 50 minutes, what the teacher does is like, they do the extra core academics on like the day before or the day after that the lesson is given. So the minutes for the week are not different for the kids. They're not missing out on any core academics. In the middle school, it is a little bit more difficult, and we are really trying to work with each of the middle schools because right now they're kind of autonomous. Like, they can choose which classroom works best for them.
But next year, the middle schools are all, they'll each have a resource period that could be utilized for this type of work.
Okay, yeah, so in the past, there hasn't been that.
That will help to protect the core curriculum by utilizing that time.
Because like Butler, I think, did it in the science class. We've tried it in the Phi Ed class to try to like do health, and like the Phi Ed classes unfortunately are really, really large. I mean, we're talking up to 40 students, and then finding the space, you know.
How many minutes are the lessons?
They're 50 minutes
50
in middle
minutes,
school, yeah, 45, 50 minutes.
10 times a year.
10 times, yeah. So, and I understand. I mean, so each middle school like administration and like student services have really worked together like to try to figure out where is the best place to put this, especially given the time of year that it's implemented. If there's other testing considerations or assessment considerations where they're also maybe losing out on that time, or that they have extra like, you know, academic interventions, we definitely wouldn't put it in that type of class. Les Paul did a really creative schedule, and like they literally they wouldn't take it out of the same class, so they had the health educators going two weeks in a row to this class of students, and then 2 weeks in a row to that class of student, like a different academic class, so they wouldn't be losing that academic time. But we really are looking at trying to figure out, especially with the new there's a new health curriculum for middle schools, looking at really kind of trying to infuse it during that time, because it really fits better with health and wellness kind of issues.
Yeah, I thought the rotation would make a lot of sense, so that the same core, because I am familiar with Butler. I was teaching at Butler when the Too Good for Drugs was happening, and I do remember it was during the science block.
Yeah.
And I often wondered about that, the minutes, you know, I don't want to say lost, but let's say lost. The science minutes that are lost, it would make sense to rotate something like that, so that there are different, you know, so that the same content area is not, you know, feeling.
Yeah.
Right, so it makes sense. I like what Les Paul did.
Yeah, it was a little challenging for our health educators, and then to make, you know, like for them to build those relationships with those groups of students, because, you know, they fluctuated a little bit, but they got it done, so.
Other questions? Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
That concludes our discussion information item. Next up will be recommendations for future meetings. Does anybody have anything that would be interesting? Yes.
Yeah, and I think this is the right committee for this, but if not, we certainly can look elsewhere. I would be interested in getting some, I don't know, maybe some feasibility information from student services around conducting like enrollment surveys. And I'm particularly interested in surveys focused on students who are residents of our district, who open enroll out or choose to go to charter or parochial schools and get an understanding of what's driving that decision making. And conversely, because I've noticed especially in the last year, I think we saw a pretty sharp increase in open enroll in, particularly at a few of our elementary schools. I think it was up generally overall, but I'd like to know what's driving those increases in open enrollment into our schools. And
And out?
yeah, so for the out, so for the out, I'd like to know for the students
Yep.
that live within our attendance
Yep.
boundaries, why are they leaving?
Right.
And there are some districts in particular where I really would like to understand better. Kettle Moraine is one where, despite our decrease in enrollment overall and the number of attendance area students that reside in the district, we're continuing to see an increase year over year of students that are open enrolling into Kettle Moraine. I would expect those numbers to be somewhat similar if there wasn't really something that was driving that increase, right? And then I really would like to understand why does there seem to be an increase in students coming in, especially at that elementary level? And what's driving this, of course, is, you know, we talk all the time about the revenue loss, but I'd like to see us start focusing more on how do we protect revenue and how do we drive revenue gain. I think number one, it's trying to figure out how to keep more of our students that resided in the district here. In order to know that, how to do that, we need to understand why they're leaving. But there's also the marketing to students outside of the district. I live, some of you know this, I live like in the most far northwest corner of the district. And I get stuff from KM and Pewaukee, glossy, high production, or high-end marketing materials telling me why I should consider, and I don't, maybe we do some of that, but if we don't, maybe we should, and maybe getting some understanding of why students may be getting drawn here will help us understand how we can draw them. So, but I don't know how difficult putting those surveys together would be, and how much access to the information about people we need to survey to get that.
We did a work session on that.
We have surveyed twice in the
Yep.
past, only out. But we have historical survey information. I'd have to go back and try to dig into where it was. We haven't done that since COVID. Oftentimes, we were looking for like drivers. At the last time we did the referendum, we wanted to get some feedback from all, and that was a good time for us to do it.
Yeah, I just feel like the landscape has changed so much, just even in the last, well, since COVID, right? I mean, we've now got these charter schools. We've got, Mill Creek Academy that's coming in.
Yep.
We've got LCCA that continues to draw students from all over the area that may not have been as prevalent. I think, Joe, you and I talked about this back in March or so when I had some questions around this. And maybe those schools may not even existed back the last time you did that. So I just think we could learn a lot from that. I don't know whether we could put something together by the time we hit fall, after we hit our September count or not, but I think that could help us lead into the following year, potentially.
Right. Now, we did discuss that at a work session at one time. Is there anything on the docket for a work session, Jim?
Not right now.
Because we had talked about increasing enrollment to increase revenue when we had our budget discussions.
Yeah, we have no workshops currently scheduled, but that doesn't mean.
Right, no, for sure. I know we were talking about continuing those discussions. So, you got the gist of that, right?
Got it, taking a note down right now.
Any other ideas for future? Anybody? All right, well, if you do, email Joe and I, or at least a little while.
This is it for
And
me,
then-
man. Gotta go to Jen.
Yes, then we'll be going to it. Right, well, meeting adjourned. Thanks for taking the time.
Is this supposed to-
Yeah.